Once again, the long knives are out for Social Security. You know, last week on the show, we had Nancy Altman and Eric Kingson of Social Security Works on, and we were celebrating that at least there was a chance for optimism, which there is, in the changing political tides towards Social Security as evinced by the so-called Warren Amendment, co-sponsored by Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Joe Manchin, which would have expanded Social Security benefits. While, of course, it didn't win in the Republican-dominated Senate, this time around, Social Security expansion won the support of most Democrats in the Senate and a number of those in Congress. So this really signals a potential change in the political debate towards Social Security in particular, and towards the idea of economic populism and a fairer economy in general. That also means that it's time to suit up conservatism's same old, tired, frayed straw men and send them into dubious battle once again. So, sure enough, here they come. The attackers this time around, just in the last week, include a libertarian finance writer and editor for the National Review, and, as people in the know would realize, inevitably, the editorial board of the Washington Post. But this battle isn't just being waged by the right, this battle against economic populism. As we saw with the re-election of Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, there are factions within the Democratic Party that want to empower its so-called centrist wing, and they've been pushing back on the party's new populism too. Now, here's a little more about that, just for those of you who are interested. There is a blogger turned columnist, I guess, named Megan McArdle. She is a conservative economics writer who used to blog as Jane Galt. And if you don't recognize that name, she's referring to John Galt, the hero of Ayn Rand's government-hating, poor person despising, fraud celebrating, and occasionally sadomasochistic novel, Atlas Shrugged. There were several reasons why it was, again, inevitable that McArdle, of all people, would go on to attack the Warren Amendment. One is her unremitting hostility to Elizabeth Warren herself. You could find that in posts going back to 2009, in which McArdle characterizes Elizabeth Warren's academic work as, quote, actively, aggressively wrong and, quote, terrible advocacy masquerading as social science. Well, she writes masquerading of social science, but she means as social science. Journalists who cover Warren's work, yours truly included, McArdle wrote in 2009, were, quote, wearing dunce caps. Now, unfortunately, McArdle's weak grasp of the facts and her difficulty with and carelessness with methodology seriously undercut her critiques of Elizabeth Warren. I wrote about that. So did a friend of mine, Mike Consul, and a number of other smart economic writers picked apart what was wrong with McArdle's critique. And by the way, McArdle once defended the Bush tax cut with a little math of hers where she was off by a factor of 10 to 1. So take that for what it will. Now, she also said a truly Ayn Randian horrible thing about retired people because, you know, these people, they seem to hate retired people. She quoted with great joy another right-winger saying that I don't know if it's ever going to be realistic that everybody saves enough to spend the last third of their life on vacation. See, to these people, retiring after a lifetime of hard work is a vacation. Now, McArdle said, oh, that's my favorite line in my newest column, where she quoted it. And then she doubled down on it because it was, I guess, mean and nasty and insensitive. And she wrote again that it would be nice that some element of American life was able to take what amounted to a multi-decade vacation. See what she did there? She repeated that idea that it's a vacation. And then she says, but that was never going to be sustainable. Now, there are two problems with that. One is it's fiscally incorrect. The Social Security program is entirely sustainable. And number two is that, of course, it continues to smear retired Americans with work battered bodies. I mean, we're talking about 75-year-old retired warehouse workers or 80-year-old former coal miners or 90-year-old ex-waitresses. We're not talking about people who sit on their easy chairs all day writing financial columns. It smears all of them as lazy and undeserving vacationers, presumably while the rest of us labor over a hot keyboard, smearing their reputation. Ayn Rand would be proud. But of course, they get it wrong. They always get it wrong, these people. So when Megan McArdle led her cohort out of the gate with something called The Left Gets It Wrong about Social Security, she just throws in the usual discredited nonsense and gets it all wrong. You see, what happens is that most Americans save. Let me give you one example of what she says. She says Americans are unprepared for retirement. You see what she did there with that word unprepared? Like, oh, you didn't get ready. It's your fault. As if saving for retirement is like washing the dog. You know, it's a thing Americans are just too lazy to do along with their other chores, and they're just too forgetful to get around to. So if you get fleas, well, it's your own fault, isn't it? But the problem is most Americans can't save for retirement. Their wages haven't been increased in real terms, roughly 40 years. They've been decimated by the distraction and diversion of wealth to the powerful few. Their pensions have been gutted by their corporations, and surveys show that in this economy, many households barely live month to month and are now likely to go into chaos if they miss even a single paycheck. So, of course, they can't save for retirement. There's so much more in the Megan McArdle piece. Just take it from me. If you want to go to the LA Times and read the piece by Michael Hiltzik, she gets it really, really wrong. But she's not alone. Ramesh Ponnuru, who is a senior editor for the National Review, wrote on the same topic. And, it's a funny thing about Ponnaru's piece. Eventually, it was called something like inaccurate democratic plan or whatever. But if you look at the URL above it, it was originally called Elizabeth Warren is Delusional About Social Security. Who's delusional, though? Well, Ponnaru once wrote a book that called Democrats the Party of Death. So I think we know the answer to that question. So again, you look, to read his piece is a long, strange trip through the hallucinatory world of those who would mislead us about Social Security. Look, that wild ride includes misperceptions about the financing of social insurance and how it works. It mischaracterizes Social Security as an anti-poverty program, and it cites a methodologically flawed study from the right-wing American Enterprise Institute, which incorrectly ascribes all sorts of social evils to Social Security, including, and I quote Ponnaru on this, reducing work, savings, and even birth rates. You didn't realize that Social Security was killing babies, did you? Now, we could, again, belabor what Ponnaru has to say. I did that in print if you're interested. But basically, the script is always the same. Smear older people, get the math wrong, mislead, and terrify. That's what the Washington Post editorial board did this week with a piece called, Get This, How Progressives Are Pandering to the Elderly. Now, let's just unpack that before we close, okay? Again, all wrong on the issues. You know the script by now. You know how they do it. They play by the rules. But we'll end with this. Now, how progressives are pandering to the elderly. First of all, it's treating the elderly, which is a group that will include, well, most of us. So it's basically treating us as a special interest group, whereas, of course, defense contractors or Wall Street bankers aren't special interest groups, but everybody else, special interest group. And any politician who wants what most of us want, according to the polls, and what most of us need, according to the good economists, that's pandering, you see, because they're not a powerful elite. So you must be pandering because you're giving the people what they want. Now, is a politician pandering when they do the will of the majority, or are they being a politician in what's supposed to be a democracy? Washington Post, what you call pandering, I call democracy, and we'll leave it there for now. But I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.